Welcome back to this mini course in optimal breathing for stress management. In the first video, I explained why breathing matters, why good breathing is the foundation for optimal brain performance. And today I'm going to talk about three key components of optimal breathing. I'm just going to say what they are, but I'm not going to suggest that you try it out until after the next video. That's because it's important to come at the practice with the right mindset, or you risk falling into a kind of mental quicksand where you make things worse, not better. I'll tell you about the right mindset in the next video. Okay, the three components. Optimal breathing involves 1. Abdominal or belly breathing as opposed to chest breathing. To do this, you need to be able to fully release the air on exhalation. 2. Gentle breathing, which is my way of describing the opposite of overbreathing. Gentle breathing maximizes oxygen delivery to the brain, which is the single most important factor in breathing physiology. 3. Slow, regular breathing as a means of developing heart coherence and activating the parasympathetic nervous system and its associated relaxation response. Not that you have to breathe slowly all the time, but a bit of regular practice is like a fitness workout for the brain and the nervous system. So let's look at the three in more depth. If we look at the muscles involved with breathing, the main one is the diaphragm, which is this sheet muscle that pulls down when you breathe in, pushing your belly out. When it relaxes again, it goes back up into a sort of parachute shape. So in abdominal breathing, the belly moves out on the in-breath, but there's also a sideways movement in the abdomen. You can feel it as a sideways spreading, especially in the lower back. Now remember I said that stressed breathing involves filling the lungs right up and then not letting the air all the way out, so that you breathe rapidly and shallowly in the upper chest. What can happen is that the diaphragm stays tight, as though it's bracing against some threat. It doesn't relax on the exhalation, which is why we don't let the air all the way out. When that happens, we're forced into a kind of lifting movement of the whole chest. If you look out for it, you can see it easily as an up and down movement of the shoulders and the upper chest. Because the brain's automatic regulation of breathing is wired to the diaphragm, overbreathing tends to be much more common in chest breathing. Moving on, the second component is gentle breathing. Again, by gentle breathing, I just mean the opposite of overbreathing, so that you optimize oxygen delivery to brain cells. When that happens, you feel clear and self-possessed, as though you're driving the bus rather than the bus is driving you. And calm too. I'd say it's extremely unlikely that you could both breathe gently and feel anxious to a significant degree at the same time. In fact, it's amazing how little air you actually need when you're not physically active. I realized this before I learned anything about breathing physiology in the context of a meditation retreat, when I found that my mind was at its most clear, concentrated and refined at the same time as my breath became hardly even perceptible. Now, whilst it's very easy to overbreathe, in fact it's pretty much impossible to underbreathe, assuming you don't have a lung disease. The body basically won't let you. Just try holding your breath and you can see how quickly that you'll start to feel air hunger. We can define overbreathing or hyperventilation as exchanging too much air in the lungs per minute, too much being more than we need. There are two parameters of the breath that define ventilation. They are breathing rate, or breaths per minute, and also the size of each breath. Overbreathing is not as simple as breathing too fast, because you can breathe very slowly and still be overbreathing if you're taking great big bellyfuls of air. Conversely, if you're breathing fast, it's still possible to be breathing well if each breath is correspondingly small. Now that said, in general it's easier to avoid overbreathing if you breathe relatively slowly. But whatever rate you breathe at, remember to keep each breath small and as gentle as you can. The third component is slow, regular breathing. I'd say avoiding overbreathing is the single most important factor in breathing well, but it's not the whole story of good breathing. Remember I mentioned another branch of breathing physiology which is to do with the parasympathetic nervous system, the carrier of the relaxation response. Well, a relatively easy way to activate the parasympathetic is slow, regular breathing. By doing so, you're likely to create some heart coherence, and I'm going to say more about what that is and why it's useful in the next video. For now, I'll just say that heart coherence tends to be maximized with a steady breathing rate of about 6 breaths per minute, or 1 breath every 10 seconds, which is quite slow actually. An average healthy breathing rate for an adult is something like 12 to 14 breaths per minute, but stressed breathing is often nearer 20 or even 30. So the practice of slow regular breathing is definitely different from everyday breathing. And I'm not saying you need to be breathing that slow all the time or even most of the time, but regular periods of practice for something like maybe 10 or 20 minutes, that's going to give you a good workout. Of course, there's no reason why you can't breathe slowly and gently and abdominally. So the 3 components can form an integrated breathing practice. But in fact, the physiology of heart coherence is practically speaking more or less independent of overbreathing, meaning that you could have some good coherence but still be overbreathing. And that's a danger that you need to watch out for. In the next video, we're going to be looking at how to approach the practice of good breathing. Mindset is key. Remember I said that it's easy to get things wrong and end up making things worse, not better. So I'm going to suggest that you hold back in trying out these ideas until after the next video, but there are a couple of practical things that you can do at this point. The first is to try out progressive muscle relaxation. This is a technique that helps you fully release muscle tension. It's relevant to breathing because you need to fully release the breathing muscles, the diaphragm especially, so that you can let the breath all the way out, which is important to avoid overbreathing. What you do is you tighten up your muscles and then release them. And in so doing, you often get a net reduction in tension. In other words, you may find that you let go by more than you tightened up by. Now, in my practice, I do a lot of muscle tension biofeedback with my clients. So I know this method does work. So sit in a fairly upright chair, such as a dining chair, with your back supported and your feet flat on the floor in front of you. As you breathe in, tighten up your shoulders and your chest. Just feel what it feels like for a second or two, and then release as you breathe out. Imagine your whole body joining in with letting go, letting everything, all the muscles, go soft and loose. Repeat this a few times, maybe more gently, so that you start to become more sensitive to the change from tense to loose. Really get familiar with the pleasant feeling of loose, soft muscles, and imagine even more of that. Move on to other muscle groups, for example the hands and the lower arms or the face, tightening and releasing, and imagining letting go more and more. Okay, now the second thing that you can do is to observe your breathing to see if you're a chest breather or abdominal breather. Sit in front of a mirror so that you can see your torso. Just breathe naturally. Don't try to change your breathing at all for this exercise. Watch for where you see movements of your breath. Do you see the shoulders go up and down, or the upper chest, or the belly? And which is moving relatively more? Obviously, movements higher up are suggesting that you're more towards the chest breathing pole.